Dear friends, let's talk about the quantum states. Let's proceed our discussions on the quantum states in biological molecules. Let's try to understand this, that how quantum mechanics is involved in describing the molecules of the biological life. So friends, if you could shrink yourself, smaller than a cell, as a whole human being, and even shrink yourself smaller than the size of a molecule, or to go further, smaller even than an atom, what would you discover? What would you observe? You will discover something shocking. You will discover that life is not a solid. Life is cloudy. There are clouds. Life is uncertain. Life is probabilistic. You will determine these different natures of life at the level of an atom. So at the deepest level, biology is not built from the hard particles. The structure is not coming out of the hard particles, but it's coming from these quantum mechanical states, these quantum mechanical fields, these quantum mechanical probabilities. It's coming from the states that flicker, that overlap, disappear, and reappear. And this is what we are going to talk about. This is where we are going to learn about. This is what we are going to feel about. And this is about those invisible states that we will again try to talk about. Because we are boiling it from a biological system that quietly holds life together. So to start with, talking about the molecular orbitals in DNA and proteins. And we know what an orbital is. Orbital is where you have the maximum probability of finding an electron. Now let us begin with a misconception. That will be a right argument here. That will be a right learning point. Now what is that? Electrons do not orbit. They don't orbit in atoms like planets do around the sun. That picture is comforting picture, revolving around the sun, revolving around the nucleus, but it is wrong. Electrons exist as clouds of possibilities, as clouds of probabilities. And these probabilities are described by the basic mathematical function, what we call as wave function. And what we observe it down inside an atom, we don't observe a position. We observe the probability. Now, how can we understand it? Let's try to understand what we are trying to. Let's assume that there's a city and it's a foggy city. There's a hell of fog. And imagine a city at the dawn, and there exist buildings. Buildings exist. But these buildings are hidden. They're hidden inside the fog. You cannot say exactly where the fog is thickest until you look at it. You have to differentiate the fog. The fog is not a random chaos. It's not randomly oriented. It has a structure. The fog that's hiding these buildings, it has a structure. Now, how can we understand it? How can we obtain an understanding from this foggy state? This fog is basically representing the cloud of electrons. And coming to that basic unit, what we call as deoxyribose nucleic acid, DNA, and the proteins, in both of them, electrons occupy these molecular orbitals. And the shared regions of probabilities exist, and these shared probabilities bind atoms together. And what we are trying to understand here is that we have these orbitals. These orbitals, they determine what they determine. They determine an approximate shape of this DNA molecule. They determine the folding nature of proteins, the stability of the biological molecules. It is based on these orbitals, molecular orbitals. Life is an architecture. It is written in these quantum clouds. And these quantum clouds are not solid lines, but they are soft. These clouds overlap. When they overlap, then you have possibilities. Now, the question arises, how does this DNA molecule stays stable when I'm telling you that there is a changing nature of these clouds? DNA, it is long, fragile molecule. And it is shaken by the heat. Heat shakes it. Water attaches it. And radiation threatens it. And yet it survives. Yet it has the existence. It develops a state of existence. And why is it so? Why? The answer to this question may be because the electrons in DNA bases they form delocalized molecular orbitals. See, the stability is coming from the uncertainty. It's that delocalization that makes this very fundamental unit of life as stable as possible. And that spread stability across the molecule. To go deeper in understanding what we are trying to understand here is, let's take an example of a tightrope walkers. You have a rope, you have a number of people, and they are holding it. So imagine people holding hands with this rope. Now, while crossing, you have a tightrope, and while crossing, if one person slips, let us assume a person slips, the other persons on the tight rope, they redistribute the load. So there is a distribution of the load. No single person holds the entire risk. The risk is distributed along this walker. Now let's explain this. Let's understand this. So what we have here, we understand it in terms of delocalized electrons. Delocalized electrons do the same thing. Now, instead of being trapped between the two atoms, what they do, these electrons spread. They spread across many atoms. And this spread, this sharing, lowers the overall energy of the molecule. And if it lowers the energy, that means it is increasing the stability of the molecule. It's increasing the stability of that system. And DNA survives. It does not survive because it is rigid. It survives because its electrons have a nature of cooperating the quantum mechanical laws, cooperating quantum mechanically. And if I take on this electron cloud or electron clouds, because they are the possibilities that make up your chemical bonds. Now, chemical bonds are not the actual hard lines. That's the job of classical chemistry. Because classical chemistry tells us, what it tells us is, it tells us that atoms bond because they want to complete their octets. They want to complete their shells so that they have the maximum stability. But what quantum mechanics tells us here? Quantum mechanics says something deeper. Atoms make bonds because they have a shared mathematical wave function. And this wave function, what it does basically is it lowers the energy of the system. So the basis is the Schrodinger's equation, because the Schrodinger's equation governs this sharing of electrons. And life exists Meaning, life exists in the solution of this equation. It is there in the solution of Schrodinger's wave equation. Again, I would like to take quite an example of dancing partners. Now, suppose you have two dancers. Let's imagine that we have two dancers. Alone, each moves awkwardly. But if they are together, their motion becomes smoother. Their motion becomes supple. Their motion becomes beautiful. Their motion becomes rhythmic. Their motion becomes more graceful and less energetic. Let's try to understand this. Let's try to understand this example that I quoted here about the two persons. Now, link it with atomic orbitals. You have atomic orbitals, and when these atomic orbitals overlap, you have a new molecular orbital. You form a new molecular orbital is formed. So this shared quantum state you have a shared quantum state between these two atomic orbitals. The shared atomic orbitals has lower energy than the separate parts. So, how does it lead us to the chemical bonds now? So what can we say here is that chemical bonds, they are not basically the promises. They are energetic agreements. They are the agreements between the two atoms. They are the agreements between the two atomic orbitals. And I can say here that biology is built from trillions and trillions of such agreements that are going on between the atoms. So connected. And talking about tunneling, you have those enzymatic reactions of enzymes. Now comes another surprise. And we can see that how it boils down to that. You have some of the biological, I should boil down into the biochemical reactions. And these chemical reactions should be too slow, classically. And it shouldn't be possible at all for the life to sustain on the classical explanations. But still, and yet they happen. These chemical biological reactions happen. These reactions happen effortlessly. And why these reactions are possible? These reactions are possible because particles sometimes, it should not be sometimes, the particles most of the times ignore the classical picture. I'm trying to build a same consensus. And my consensus here is quantum tunneling. So what makes these things happen? These things happen because of the quantum tunneling. These things happen because of the quantum mechanical tunneling. To cross energy barriers, the barriers which are impossible from classical point of view. And crossing these barriers without actually climbing on these mountains. It is because of that crossing that makes it possible. And again, here, I would again tell you to imagine a traveler, taking the same example. A traveler is walking, in front of him is a mountain, and classically for the traveler, the traveler has to actually walk over the top of this mountain, and then he can be on the other side of the mountain. But quantum mechanically, there's a shortcut. Quantum mechanically, they can tunnel. Quantum mechanically, even if their energy is less, they sometimes appear on the other side of the mountain against the classical intuition. We cannot accept it classically. No paths. It's not like that it takes a path. No. It's like appearing and disappearing. No efforts. Just one side, just another side. Just a permission to cross the mountain. And all of these things are happening at these small scales. And these things are happening in enzymes. In enzymes, we can talk about protons and electrons. What they do, they tunnel. They are able to do that what they cannot do classically. And what it does, this accelerates reaction. It accelerates the chemical reaction by orders of the magnitude, but by many orders of the magnitude. So life depends on this. It depends on these quantum mechanical effects. It depends. You cannot have life without tunneling. The metabolism that we have, the metabolism will slow down. The replication of the cells, creating those copies, would fail. Life would collapse. So, what happens? Biology survives because quantum mechanics quietly cheats. It cheats. It cheats. It makes those progressions which are not possible classically. Why classical chemistry is incomplete? It is incomplete because there are trajectories. You have accurate position and momentum in a coordinate system. Classical chemistry, what it does, classical chemistry assumes there are particles. And these particles have positions. And these particles make collisions. And because of these collisions, there are reactions. And reactions follow the fixed trajectories, the fixed paths. And energy flows smoothly over these paths. But, to be precise, the biological reality basically disagrees. It disagrees with the classical shots. You don't have things classical at these levels. So, the misleading, it's a kind of misleading map. This we will take. Imagine navigating a city. You have a map, and with a map that ignores bridges and tunnels. You're holding a map, but you're not considering the bridges and the tunnels. You would think that some destinations are impossible because there are no bridges and there are no tunnels. And you will say, come on, it's not mechanically possible for the humans to go over, until you discover them. So, the underground, it has to have the underground roots. That makes these destinations possible. So what classical chemistry misses here? Where it fails? It misses here because electron is delocalized. Electrons have delocalization. Electrons can tunnel. There can be quantum mechanical coherence, a very basic idea for the quantum computer. You have the probabilistic transitions. These effects are not rare. They are basically the bones. They are essential. And life does not merely tolerate quantum behavior. It's not like that it's tolerating the quantum behavior. There's an imposition. Oh, life depends on it. Life has its own signature coming out of it. So quantum states, we would like to have a discussion. We discuss these biological systems when we discuss them at the molecular level. Biology does not choose the outcomes. This is the most fundamental argument. It basically samples the probabilities. And each reaction that you have is a probability distribution. And each bond you have in classical picture is a quantum mechanical delocalization of clouds. It's a quantum mechanical compromise between the atoms. It's not like that fixing the octets. Life proceeds not by certainty. It proceeds by uncertainty. And it proceeds by the likelihood that you can imagine. So what's the lottery of existence? So what is it? If I say you that, imagine drawing a ticket every second. Most draws are ordinary. But occasionally, what we can expect, occasionally one changes everything. What am I trying to tell? What am I trying to learn? What am I trying to understand? I'm trying to understand the mutations. I'm trying to understand the reactions. I'm trying to understand folding. I'm trying to understand the pathways. And all of these things arise. They arise from quantum mechanical probabilities. Their backbone is quantum mechanical cloud of electrons. They are purely described by the Schrodinger's wave equation. And most vanish. The most of the list that I talked about, they vanish, but some persist. So over time, these microscopic changes that we are trying to understand, that we are trying to talk about, that we are trying to describe, these microscopic chances that you have, what they do is they shape the macroscopical biology. As a biological being, I am being shaped by these quantum mechanical laws. So, when you look at life in the form of a plant, in the form of an animal, you see flesh and you see the form. But beneath that flesh, beneath that form, but beneath it lies something stranger. A trembling world of clouds, a trembling world of waves, a trembling world of fields, a trembling world of probabilities. So beautiful. Life is not built on certainty. It is built on allowed states, the states that are allowed for the life. And every heartbeat, every systole and diastole, every breath, and let me take it back to the thought, and every thought is a triumph, is a success, it's a triumph of quantum mechanics. It's the success of quantum mechanics expressing in the form of a complex biological life. I hope you like it. Goodbye. Have a nice time.